What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the new Indian action epic Salaar, aka Salaar Part 1 Ceasefire, a movie which was not on my radar until a couple days ago, but I recently reviewed the film Animal, another Indian kind of gangster movie with a lot of action in it. And that movie definitely whetted my appetite to watch a lot more Indian cinema. And also at a time where a lot of American blockbuster films are just, let's put it kindly, are bitterly disappointing. I mean, 2023 was a year of just so many abject, spectacular, embarrassing failures and movies that are just disappointing, frustrating, irritating as hell. So why not throw my net a little wider and watch genre films from some other countries, whether that's horror films like When Evil Lurks from Argentina, or Godzilla Minus One from Japan, or an action movie like Salaar Part 1 Ceasefire, which it's one of those movies where it begs the question, what if we made a 3-hour action epic where the entire movie feels like one long trailer or just a series of climaxes, one after another, where if you even look away from the screen for a second, you're going to miss something completely insane. But if you're like me a couple days ago and you're unfamiliar with the premise for Salaar, here's all the vital stats ripped straight from Wikipedia. It's a 2023 Indian Telugu language epic action drama film written and directed by Prashanth Neel and produced by Vijay Kiragandar. The film stars Prabhas in the titular role, but the film has music composed by Ravi Basra, and the music is a major feature attraction. I've been shamelessly humming the theme music to the movie for the last couple of hours. And I should add that Salaar Part 1 Ceasefire was released worldwide on December 22nd, 2023 in both standard as well as IMAX formats, and the sequel to the film titled Salaar Part 2, Shoryanga Parvam, is in development, and as far as I'm concerned, that sequel can't get here soon enough because this movie ends in such glorious epic fashion and such a killer cliffhanger. I was like, oh shit, I've been in this theater for 3 hours, but I wouldn't mind sitting in the theater for another 3 hours if I could watch Part 2 right now. So what is the kind of the premise or the story? Because a lot of this movie takes place in a fictional realm that does not exist, but it borrows heavily from our own world. But I'm so ignorant of India and its culture and its provinces and regions, I wasn't quite sure if this was some sort of wild reimagining of famous organized crime figures or military figures or whatever the case might be. But as it turns out, this is completely a work of fiction. But here's the official premise. In the city of Khansaar, Raja Manar plans to make his son Vardaraja Manar as his successor, but Raja Manar's ministers and advisors plan a coup d'etat to kill them by hiring armies from Russia and Serbia to attack Vardaraja in Khansaar. Vardaraja manages to escape from Khansaar and meets his childhood friend Deva, who learns about this and sets out to make Vardaraja as the undisputed successor of Khansaar. And the only way I can describe Khansaar, imagine like a military province that's like a giant city of epic proportions, surrounded by this huge wall with cannons on top that look like they belong on the goddamn Death Star to protect it from X-Wing fighters. And within those walls, it's nothing but vice and criminality and gambling and weapons and drugs and just complete and total insanity. And within this society, you have all these rival factions that basically operate under hereditary titles. And so you have all these like incredibly powerful crime families with, they all have their own individual armies that they can use at their disposal. And they're constantly competing for power, wealth, prestige, or just, fighting to the death at the drop of a hat. And the reason the movie is called Ceasefire is that there's a giant ceasefire at the core of the story in this elaborate flashback sequence that's on the verge of falling to pieces, resulting in complete and total violent mayhem as far as the eye can see. And I will admit that I spent much of the movie really confused about all the various factions and bloodlines and who the various characters are. I mean, it's an enormous cast of characters, and all of whom seem to wield limitless power. But luckily, at the core of the story, is a story about friendship. You've got two guys that have been friends since they were little kids, and one is just completely, totally fearless. There's no threat or no obstacle or no foe too great that he's not willing to risk life and limb in order to protect the livelihood and just the physical person of his pal. And the movie hits the ground running with some formative experiences from their childhood and then jumps forward in time to the present day, where one's been kind of hiding in obscurity for many years, but he's about to kind of come out of retirement in order to be of use to his friend again. But what made the movie so hard for me to follow at times, in a good way, but the editing style of this movie is incredibly complex. Like, the movie will be going and going, and then somebody will start telling a story, and that flashback might last 45 minutes to an hour, and within that flashback, you're cross-cutting between different characters with like moving at different speeds with like different continuities. And so you really got to sit up and focus on what the hell's going on, or you will be completely, totally lost. However, even if you are a little bit confused like I was about who some of the characters are, it's so over the top and so stylish and so operatic. It's so big and it's so violent and it's so just in your face. Even if you're a little perplexed by the plot, you're still going to have a damn good time, because this movie is just balls to the wall attitude. Like, I'm not going to claim it's got great elaborate like action choreography or great shootouts. It's more just like macho posturing, walking into a scene, staring at people, and with like one punch smashing a guy through a wall, or like, it's hard to put the action into words, because I've never seen an action movie that employs this style of action. I'm much more used to like the Hong Kong style of guns a-blazing, or obviously I've got a deep knowledge of American action movies. But Salaar was something quite different, where the action's more mythological. Like, these are giant mythic figures with almost limitless power under the right circumstances. And this is going to sound strange or perhaps even contradictory, but it feels more like a fantasy film, like an epic fantasy film, than it does like a gangster film or a war film. Even though there are guns and tanks and cannons and all the trappings of modern life on display in the movie, the way these different families and their rivalries are depicted, it almost feels like this elaborate pantheon of gods that are always plotting and scheming to outwit one another or destroy one another. And some of the resources they have at their disposal are just absolutely terrifying. When this movie is dark, it's so dark and eerie that you almost can't even take it. Like, so one person, this is a small spoiler and I apologize, but plug your ears for the next couple seconds, but he's breeding an army of rabid people that are basically like, sprinting zombies, but they're still alive. But he's basically kept them in cages and been giving them drugs and abusing them to such an extent that they basically have like the strength and the ferocity to take on 10 men. So he's breeding an entire army of these psychopaths that can like run through walls and like bend bars. And yet, even when there's like 50 of those psychos going up against the biggest badass in the movie, Salaar himself, he's just like, I'm just destroying them. And it's like he's like the Incredible Hulk, but they don't have powers. They don't have powers in a traditional kind of an American context. They're just very powerful without having officially ever become superhuman, if that makes any sense. So if you're wondering who is the stud muffin at the core of this movie, it's an actor by the name of Prabhas. I don't know if that's a first name or a last name. That's how he's listed on IMDb. This guy is stoic. He doesn't necessarily show a ton of range in this. I mean, he's basically got two emotions. He's got loyalty, like undying loyalty to his closest friend, and then he's got like, I wouldn't call it rage, but he's got like his seek and destroy mode. When he's basically like an attack dog, when you let him off the chain, he just goes completely, totally insane. But his friend and his mother are able to kind of keep him in check, because he's in hiding for reasons that I won't go into, and he's basically living as like an engineer at this giant mining camp, and he works on cars and vehicles and that sort of thing, but he's just, real macho, huge muscles, always covered in grease and that sort of thing, and always has like all these tools around his waist. But when he's given permission to go to work, like if there's like a little girl in trouble being surrounded by a bunch of thugs, I mean, one of the most bone-chilling and eerie sequences that I've ever seen in an action movie is in this movie, where a little girl is about to be carried away by a bunch of bandits. This guy steps in and just starts fucking them up. And as he does so, more and more the women and the girls in the community start gathering, and they're singing as they watch him fight. But it's not like, yay, 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 like a happy, joyful song. It's like a song that pierces you right down to your DNA and just sends evil chills up your neck, like hell's a-coming in the form of Salaar. He's about to beat the shit out of all of you. And it's just glorious. It was so satisfying to watch. And I mentioned before how this movie has an incredibly sophisticated, elaborate editing style. And a lot of that sophistication always seems to be in service of prolonging the suspense and anticipation of when Salaar is going to really cut loose. Because most of the movie is just kind of standing there and glaring as all these things are happening around him. And it does this great thing. Like Sam Peckinpah and John Woo used to do this quite a bit, where when you're cross-cutting between different scenes, some of those scenes are playing at different speeds, allowing you to kind of extend in a really elastic way certain time. Like, this movie really understands how malleable the function of time is in a movie, and how through cross-cutting you can really get into some strange, bizarre, complicated territory. But it's all in the service of the story. It's all in the service of the emotion, so that when Salaar finally just like, punches somebody into the stratosphere, like, yes, it's like this big climax, like almost like a sexual climax in some way, where you're finally getting to release all that tension, and he just starts mowing people down. But if this movie were just 3 hours of carnage and nonstop action, it probably would have gotten a little excessive and a little tedious. Once again, there's a lot of heart and soul here, and it's because the relationship between Salaar and his friend Vardaraja Manar, it really works. You really feel it, because these are really close friends but have slightly different backgrounds, but going deep into their past when they were like 10 or 11-year-old children. We see two examples where they both had each other's back, where they came to the aid and defense of the other one and really proved to one another that they were going to be absolutely brothers for life. And like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, there's an action scene that's so cool and so outrageous, involving wrestling and electricity. And anyway, I don't want to spoil the movie, but the scene was so intense. I was like, all right, wherever this movie goes, I'm curious. Like, let's see what happens, because I don't want to get into I don't want to fall into a trap where, because I liked Animals so much a couple weeks ago, that like I immediately assumed that all Indian action movies are going to be created equal. And as I mentioned before, I think Animals the superior movie because it's got so much more going on underneath the surface. But if you just want a pure action movie, maybe Salaar is more your speed, because it doesn't feature as much singing as Animal did. And if it does feature singing, it's much more organic. It's in the context of the story. Like, if they want to have a song, like, there's a great scene where a teacher randomly asks a child in class to sing a song that she taught her, and the child stands up and just starts singing the most beautiful fucking song you've ever heard. Like, all right, that's a lot of production value for a little child in class. But it works in the context of the story. It's not like the whole movie stops so that the entire cast and crew can all start singing and dancing. And I know that can be a major obstacle for a lot of American viewers, where they're just not used to seeing musicals mixed with other genres. They think musicals are their own genre, and they kind of do that whole Disney princess thing, and they don't like seeing it mixed with any other genre. But I feel like the musical can come in different forms. Like, if I were to try to persuade somebody to be more open-minded, like, what's the difference between a musical versus a movie where music is featured prominently? Like the comedy, This Is Spinal Tap. Is that a musical? Like, I mean, it's more like a fake documentary comedy, but it's got so many songs performed by the cast, it kind of is a musical. Or take an animated classic like Heavy Metal. It's not a musical, but it's got kick-ass rock and roll music, like wall-to-wall music throughout the entire movie. So it kind of is a musical. So I would encourage everybody to have an open mind. But I feel like even if you hate musicals, Salaar is going to be much easier fit for your tastes and sensibilities, because once again, it's primarily a movie about really scary, dangerous people fighting to the death for control over this fictional city. And I don't know how long it took them to make part 1, but I'm dying to see part 2. But while we wait for Salaar part 2, I can definitely go back and watch some of the earlier movies by director Prashanth Neel, because they carved their teeth or made a reputation for themselves with these two movies, KGF Chapter 1 and KGF Chapter 2. I don't know if KGF can hold a candle to Salaar. Who knows? Maybe they're even better. But I will go back and check those out. And it could be a situation where he was kind of learning his craft on those, and he was unleashing the beast on Salaar. But I've seen, I think I saw the trailer for KGF Chapter 1, but I have almost no memory of it. But if it's yet another experience where it's just 3 hours of fight scenes and over-the-top kind of operatic combat and that sort of thing, I'm down, because, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we have a major problem with our domestic movie marketplace right now, where the big budget kind of roller coaster rides or popcorn movies or event movies, they're just sucking. They're sucking ass and sucking big time. And I'm just sick of it, because I love going to the movies once or twice a week. I will gladly go to the movies every time you give me an excuse to go. But at a certain point, you've been burned so many times that you just lose all interest in particular storylines or franchises or filmmakers. Like if you were to try to make me become a fan of something like Star Wars or Marvel again, you would have to move some serious mountains and not only give us one great movie, but probably multiple, because I've been so burned and so betrayed by those horrible franchises that I'm just sick to death of even discussing them, or at least sick to death of like pretending to be excited when there's a new one on the horizon, because I know it's more likely than not that the movies are going to completely suck ass by the time they get to us. And so looking ahead to 2024, I'm going to keep a very open mind about what movies I'm going to go see, like whether it's Japanese animation or Indian action flicks or Argentinian horror films or whatever the case might be. I don't care, but I'm going to keep a very open mind because I love seeing movies. I love reviewing movies. I love discussing movies, but I have a hard time just kind of feeding on the negativity and constantly talking about which filmmakers and which studios are consistently disappointing me. I guess in terms of box office, that's fine. But as a fan, someone who loves stories, who loves getting invested in stories, you can only have your heart broken but so many times before you give up on certain studios or franchises or whatever the case might be. So thank you to Prashanth Neel for giving me one more reason to be excited about the action genre in 2023, and fingers crossed Salaar Part 2 comes to us in the not so distant future. So I hope I've excited the curiosity of some of you out there and made you aware of a movie that otherwise you might not have heard of. The movie's playing theatrically in New York right now. I have no idea how wide a release it's getting, but if it's playing in IMAX screens, it's got to have a pretty decent release around the country. So check it out. Let me know what you think, and if you think I'm dead wrong, or maybe it's one of those situations where the grass is always green, or we get very blasé about our own homegrown entertainment, and then it's very easy to get excited by an action experience from another culture because everything about it just feels so fresh and new. And fair play, that might be the case, but any movie that can keep you entertained for 3 straight hours is doing something right. So check it out and let me know what you think. But can't thank you enough for listening to my rant on this topic. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. But I hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.